Okay. I would like to introduce Nikki. Now, I do know a little bit about her backstory. Sorry, my phone is annoyingly ringing. Um, and I've heard her testimony basically through different people. And honestly, she has a lot in common with me. And I actually saw her in person down at an event a couple weekends ago when I went to see Fred and Brad and Geraldine. And I saw her relationship with her kids and her husband, and it was like, oh my gosh, like this is so amazing. Like this girl used to be this and now she's this. Like it's just like a total transformation. And that's why I invited her here, because she comes highly recommended. She has a transformational story to say and to tell, and you're going to be blown away by it. And just the little interactions that I've had with Nikki this week, I can tell she's centered in God. And that's where it's at here. So I'm just so excited to welcome Nikki. You can unmute yourself and start when you are ready.
Thank you, Summer. Hi, my name is Nikki, and I am a recovered alcoholic. And by the grace of God and this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have been sober since Christmas Eve of 2016. And that is a miracle. Like that could be, I feel like sometimes it's still, I could like just say that sentence and like that could be like enough miracle like to blow me away for the rest of my life. The fact that that I've been sober, someone like me who couldn't, have a moment without the obsession being upon me. And when I was drinking, I didn't ever have any control over the amount that I consumed. I spent very, very little time not in the physical allergy. And because those periods of dry time that I had throughout the years, like the obsession was just so strong that like on my will alone, I stay sober like 2 days, right? 3 days, maybe a couple weeks. So that's a miracle. I always kind of preface when I speak by saying that you know, I don't like talk a lot about my childhood, and what things were like growing up, because I'm one of those people, like I am a firm believer that I was born an alcoholic. I don't know why. Like the big book says, like, why it is that I like don't drink like other people, and like maybe one day we'll solve that. And like, I don't know, maybe one day science will, but like for right now, all I know is that I am an alcoholic. I don't drink like other people. And that was very evident to me in different avenues, looking back, like from a young age. One thing I do share about is the fact that I can identify with this spiritual malady from a very, very, very young age. And like, step 11, I love like talking about 10, 11, and 12. Like that is trudging the road of happy destiny, right? And like, we need to maintain conscious contact, right? And like, that malady is the exact opposite of that, right? Like I was completely ignorant to the fact that like there was a loving God that wanted nothing but the best for me my entire life, and I was so blind to it. And like I can identify with the feeling of like void from a very young age. I remember being like 6 years old and like being like just disgusted with life. Like, is this all there is? Is this all there, like playing with my friends and then being like, ugh, and like now I have to go home and now I have to be by myself at such a young age. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and like, seeing her like with such joy doing things, like it saddens me to think like I had such like inner sadness at such a young age. But then I discovered alcohol, right? That feeling. I found that you know, I could stuff it away, and I could make it subside by, of course, like seeking external things, like I assert my will over things. I grab these little things on the outside of me and they make me feel better. And as a child, I found that early on with like successes in school. I'd make my parents happy. I'd feel good for a little bit, but then blah, like, so I do it again. I overexert myself. I excel in this class. I excel in this sport. And then like it's with people. I use this person to get what I want. I get in this relationship. I get this job. And like that was how everything built until like finally like the ease and comfort that came at once from taking like the first drink, and I don't remember like, the buzz coming on, like I don't remember the details of it, but what I do remember is like I'm high strung. And if you've ever, this is like, in Zoom world, I'm sitting, when I speak in person, I can't stand still. I'm like walking, pacing the stage, like interacting with the crowd. I'm an anxious person. What I remember was exactly what the book says, like the ease and comfort that came at once when like I took a drink and it just like it quieted all of this like inner turmoil, like this anxiety, everything that like I was for so long. It just quieted all of that. And like that was such a relief to feel that. It says that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And for me, the effect that I was craving was ease and comfort. And unfortunately, the amount of alcohol, the type of alcohol, those things changed and progressed over the years, because of this physical allergy, right? It manifests in the phenomenon of craving, and like the craving that was once satiated, right, with a couple Bud Lights with my girlfriends when I'm 14 years old, like isn't quite doing the trick, when I'm 27. So drugs and alcohol, like that was my solution. Like I found my solution in the bottle. The ease and comfort like quieted everything. And like, I love the line in Bill's story where he says like that, I had arrived, right? Like this was what life was all about. Drink was taking an exhilarating part in my life. Like that's how I felt. Drinking like made me the woman I always dreamt that I can be. When I got out of college, I dropped out of an Ivy League school because I couldn't live up to my own expectations. I, felt like I was failing the people around me. But then like I found a job that allowed me to drink the way I wanted to. I could walk around the dining room floor, like, with a glass of wine in my hand. And I was this successful, food and beverage director for the Ritz-Carlton. And like, drink was playing an exhilarating part in my life. And like, it gave me the ease and comfort to like portray the woman I wanted to be, have the relationships I wanted, go after the things I wanted. Unfortunately though, you know, alcohol, it does mean camaraderie, right? It says this in A Vision for You. It does mean camaraderie for normal people. It means like conviviality and friendship and like all these great things. And it is a social lubricant for lots of people, but lots of people don't have the physical allergy that I have. And of course, I didn't like identify it as such when I was in active addiction. I didn't learn about any of this until I got sober. But I definitely knew that I didn't drink like other people long before I tried to stop drinking. I could definitely see that the way I was drinking, I mean, when I was 15, 16 years old, was not the same way that my friends were drinking like back in high school. I found that, when I was working, like I was drinking behind the bar, I was making myself cocktails first thing. Like I was not drinking like other people because once I started, like I said, I spent the majority of my active alcoholism out there, in the allergy through the well-known stages of a spree. And like I said, it's unfortunate because like, alcohol did the trick. It worked for a while. If I didn't like the effect that was produced by it, I wouldn't have done it for so long. And, it came to a point where I started having some consequences. And, at this point I had no exposure to this program, and like consequences held like a little bit of weight with me. They didn't obviously hold like the depth and weight necessary to get and keep me sober, but like they were like troubling, right? Like I was starting to see relationships fizzle and things were getting bad. So, I tried to get sober a couple of times. I went through all the progressing places that we may or may not go to. I went to detox several times. Like it gets worse and worse and worse. I go to detox, I go to the psych ward, I go to institutions. Now I'm in jail, now I'm homeless on the street, now I'm living under a bridge, right? I'm a homeless prostitute on the streets of New Jersey and Florida because I'm flip-flopping back and forth. And the only place I have left to wind up is on the Dr. Phil show, right? Like these are the places I go in my attempts to get sober. And every single time that I went into those places not wanting to drink anymore, right? Because that's the baffling feature of alcoholism. You know, a lot of meetings read how it works. And like, I love to point out this line because it says, you know, alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. And I love the line in the book where it says what the baffling feature of alcoholism is: this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. So all throughout these years, every time the physical allergy got bad, right, I'm passing through the well-known stages of a spree, things get bad, and I'll emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. Usually it's because I have some sort of consequence, right? Like I go to jail, I get a DUI, whatever, I get arrested, I get pregnant, right? I hit these consequences, I emerge with this firm resolution. And like when that happens, a lot of the time I mean it, right? I had sometimes I didn't want to stop drinking, but towards the end, I didn't want to be living the life I was living anymore. I was waking up on a mattress that I found in a dumpster on the streets of Lake Worth, Florida, which, like, by the grace of God, is where I live sober with my family today, right? I used to sleep in a field 5 miles away from where I live now. On this mattress, 9 months pregnant, walking up and down every day, doing whatever I had to do to get my next drink. And that was how I spent the last year of my 9 months, the last 9 months of my final spree, right? And the physical allergy gets me to these points, right, where like the spree gets so bad, I hit some consequence, right? And I emerged remorseful with this firm resolution not to drink again. And the way it looked right before I got sober was that I was 32 weeks pregnant, and a producer called me from the Dr. Phil show. My family had reached out. They didn't know where I was. They knew I was out using and drinking again because that's what I do. And they heard that I might be pregnant. And they said that if she's pregnant, she's still drinking. And they were right, you know. So I decided to go on the Dr. Phil show. Like, what else did I have left to lose? I have no other options. So I go on the Dr. Phil show, and like those good people, they sent me to treatment, and they gave me all the medical care. And I gave birth at 39 weeks to a little girl who came out perfect. There was nothing wrong with her. Despite all of my best efforts to destroy myself, right? Like I was the person that blacked out and like woke up with the paramedics reviving me at 7 months pregnant. Like, how dare you? How dare you bring me back to life? Like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? No regard for the unborn child I was carrying. And then I gave birth to her, and she was perfect. There was nothing wrong with her. And they handed her to me in the hospital, and she is cute. And she's like a little child of AA now. And they handed her to me in the hospital, and I looked at her, and I fell in love. And if anyone is a parent, human or pet, I'm sure you know the feeling of like just looking at your little creature, because I felt this way with like my dogs even right before I had kids, like, and just looking at them and being like, oh my gosh, you are perfect. And that's how I felt when I saw my daughter. She is perfect. She came out smiling. I kid you not. And like, I look at her and like, that's my firm resolution, like I am not going to drink anymore. And I meant that with every ounce of my being, right? But that's the baffling feature of alcoholism. No matter how great the necessity or the wish, I didn't want to drink at that point. When I looked at my daughter, the last thing I wanted to do was hurt her. And I don't think anyone out there looks at their loved ones and says like, man, I can't wait to break your heart again, right? Like, I don't think that we go out with this like intention of like, I just want to destroy you. And that was not what I wanted to do with my daughter. But unfortunately, I didn't know what I was up against. All I understood at that point was like the physical allergy. I have something that happens once I start where I can't stop. I knew that. And unfortunately, I had never really gotten involved with the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous until I got sober in 2016. So I had gone to a lot of treatment centers and detoxes and jail and like psych wards. And I had minimal exposure to AA meetings while I was in there. And, a lot of times the therapists that I had were very well-meaning. Like, I certainly don't think these people wanted to cause me harm, but they're not alcoholics, right? And they would tell me things that are true, right? Like, if you don't pick up the first drink, you don't get drunk. Like, yeah, that's totally true. And I knew that, right? Like, I knew and could see that, like, yes, once I start, I can't stop. And like, I knew that, but like, for whatever reason, and I didn't understand at the time why it was that, with 4 days sober, 7 days sober, one time I made it to day 63. I was miserable, but I made it 63 days sober. Why is it that I pick back up knowing, right? I know what happens. And the book talks about this, like the insanity, right? Like I talk about my little train tracks here. Like, here's my sound reasoning that's going to inevitably fail to hold me in check, because parallel to it is this insane idea. And someday, right, some trivial excuse is going to pop up and it's going to like just give way, and my sound reasoning will fail to hold me in check. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. And like, this is what I did not comprehend. I went to treatment centers where they would say things like, Niki, you're powerless over alcohol. That means you can't drink. You can't drink. If you start again, you know what happens. But like, if you tell me that like, okay, like I need to decide not to drink, that's alluding to the fact that I still have power over the drink. And it was like, man, what a breakthrough it was when someone told me, Niki, if you're powerless, you've lost the power of choice. And that's not just when you're drinking. You don't just lose control when you're drinking. You lack the ability not to pick up when you're sober. And like, wow, mine was blown, right? Like, I knew the physical part, right? And when someone finally explained it to me as an allergy, I got that, right? Like, I don't react normally, people have allergies all the time. Like, I know people who are like, I used to work in food and beverage. Like I said, if someone comes in and they're like deathly allergic to something, like they'll tell you like, hey, I'm going to die if I eat strawberries. They don't say like, they don't come in after having like their throat close up. They have to like, rush, like get hit with the EpiPen. Like that happens. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to eat a strawberry again. Like, yeah, I liked the strawberry shortcake that I was eating, but like, it's not worth my life. Right. They'll warn the kitchen. We'll flag down the chef. We'll be like, hey, this person has a severe allergy to this. Like, don't even let it touch their food, right? My allergy is just as severe, right? And how insane is it that I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll just try vodka this time, right? Like, I won't drink whiskey anymore. Like the person doesn't de-seed the strawberry and then they're like, well, let's try it this way, right? Maybe if I pick out the seeds, I won't die this time, like people don't do that. Except my husband, who's lactose intolerant and clearly an alcoholic because he tries the lactate, he's got quite the physical allergy. Like normal people, right? When they experience an allergy that's so life-threatening, they just don't pick up the allergen, right? And if like my allergy was all it was, and like, yes, that sets me apart, super important to understand, then I would just not pick up the first drink and that would be done. We would all go to detox and no one would be sitting here on a Friday night talking about how we have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, because that would be it. We would all have the knowledge of what comes next. And that would hold enough depth and weight to keep us all sober. But like that was not my experience. So when someone finally told me like, no, the powerless means that like you've lost the power of choice, and that is not just the out of control things that happen when you're on a spree, not being able to control that. This occurs when you're sober, right? Like we keep talking about that RID cycle, right? The well-known stages of the spree. I merge remorseful with the firm resolution not to drink again. But like what happens, it keeps going back around, and there I am, restless, irritable, and discontented, just like 6-year-old Niki, who saw no hope in the world. I'm restless, irritable, and discontented until I can again experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first drink. Like, that's it right there. The obsession, me, restless, irritable, and discontented, like the first drink right here. I know what happens, the ease and comfort. I know what happens after too, right? And like my sound reasoning will hold me in check. Maybe for a minute, maybe for an hour, maybe a couple days, but at some point, like something crazy is going to pop into my mind that's going to be like, that's, right? Like crazy, right? Like, I'll only drink scotch this time. I'll pour milk in my whiskey. I'll only drink after my child goes to sleep, whatever it may be. And like something that's going to click for me. Like, yeah, that's it. That's the one. Being a mom is hard. If I just put my daughter down and then I drink after she falls asleep, I'll do that, right? Like, it somehow wins out. And that's the thing that gets me when I don't want to do this, when I know I don't need to be doing this, when every single part of me doesn't want to hurt the people around me. I want to stay sober for myself. I want to stay sober for my daughter, but I can't live with the feeling I have. And I hate myself, right? That's how it got for me. And like, I'm not speaking to what anyone else's like relationship with the spiritual malady looks like. I'm an anxious person, but like that anxiousness transformed into like, I hate myself. I hated the person I had become. I hated the things I did while I was using. I hated the way I abandoned my daughter. I hated that DCF came and took her away from me. And I deserved all of those things, right? Like I can clearly see my mistake in those things, but I still hate myself for it. So why, why do I want to live a life where all I do is carry those things around with me when I know the ease and comfort that comes at once? But then like this other option was introduced to me, right? Like just like they tell you to in working with others, right? Like we really nail home the hopelessness of the malady, like the more hopeless, the better. And that's what someone did to me. They drilled it just like this, like you're powerless, this, like my own experience was showing me how all my attempts to stay sober had failed, how I felt about myself, how the obsession won every single time. But then just like working in others, like we can dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady because like hang tight, there's a solution, right? I love that. I love that. Like the book does some like great things. And like, that's one of my favorite parts. Like, I feel like in working with others, it is just guiding us. Like we are going to nail home step one, because that's what someone did for me. And when someone gave me like such an intense view of step one, utilizing like their experience and relating it to my experience, I was sold, right? I believed it. It finally explained the way I drank, the way I felt while drinking, the way I felt when I was not drinking, in the way I always felt about myself. It explained all of those things, right? Because it all stems from the unmanageability, the internal unmanageability, the restless, irritable, and discontented that I have recognized in my life since I was, 6 years old. That's where it stems from. And like, I was so sold on step one, like the little first part that talks about the powerlessness, that like when they just squeak in the fact that like, hey, but it's a spiritual solution, I didn't even care, right? I was so broken. And like the book says that too, alcohol is a great persuader. It beats us into a state of reasonableness. I was so sold on what I had experienced in step one that like I didn't care what came next. And like the funny thing is, after 10 years in and out of the rooms, like maybe not getting an accurate presentation, maybe just not paying attention, not going to a lot of meetings, finally someone like step one to me, right? And I was just like, okay, like, and like it says that in working with others, let them ask you what you did. Like that's me on the edge of my seat, like sitting in the step one class in the treatment center I'm at, right? Like, what did you do next? And he's like, I work the steps, and like to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like what? You work the steps? Like this was like mind-blowing stuff for me, right? Someone who was convinced that like the 12 steps didn't work because I had gone and sat in a couple meetings and heard them read the 9th-step promises at the end, and I was like, oh, economic insecurity has not left me, this doesn't work, right? Like I didn't believe that. I also didn't even know like what the 12 steps were, right? So after having like this such a profound step one experience, like I was willing to do whatever. And at that point, with whatever 2-3 weeks sober, um, my decision was like, whatever, like I'm open to whatever. I could clearly see that my attempts to keep myself sober and happy had failed. And like, that was pretty much like what the decision for me looked like. And like going through from that point forward, you know, I always like breeze over this part when I speak, because like I don't do anything special and I don't do anything different. Like I just worked the steps out of the book. I was very, very fortunate that I went to a treatment center where they really encouraged that. I picked my first sponsor off a list of women's names, and that was my first sponsor. I picked her name. She was the first person that said she was able to come meet with me. I wrote my first 4th step while I was in treatment. I read it to her while I was in treatment. I was in treatment for a couple months longer before I was able to get out, and I started making amends when I got out. So after I was at about 5 months sober, when I was free of the treatment center completely, and I flew up to New Jersey. And like, God and the universe really do a great job of lining things like this up, because I had to fly up to make some legal amends for things. So I was able to make amends to people face to face. and then came down and started sponsoring women. And like this is the good stuff, right? I know something was different, right? Like someone like me who has experienced like the hopelessness that I felt. I never thought I would get sober. I thought I was going to die. I wanted to die. I wanted to give like my plan was to give birth on the streets of Lake Worth and have DCF take my child. I didn't even want to tell my family I was pregnant because I didn't want to deal with that. I did, like, that's how selfish I was, right? I didn't even want this child to be in my life because I can't drink the way I want to if I have to have, like how selfish I was. The person that I was 6 years ago, it blows my mind, right? So I got sober, and shortly after I celebrated my first year sober, DCF filed a petition to terminate my parental rights. Um, you know, and this program like has shown me, and like this is one thing I believe so firmly, and like if I continue to like trudge this road, I walk along with this purpose, like I know I'm doing the right thing. I have confidence that the right thing will happen. It's easy to say right now, didn't feel so great in the moment, right? Like it's really easy to look back at those hard times. So it's like a dust ball flying around my face. It's really easy to look back at those hard times and be like, gosh, like thank God I relied on God. Like God saw me through it. That like what happened on the end was far better, but man, it sure hurts in the moment. And like my first year of sobriety was rough, right? I was so connected though. Living in halfway, God relieved me of a lot of stuff. My ability and legality to drive and operate a vehicle, right? Can't own them, can't drive them, couldn't do that till I had almost 3 years sober. I lost my license for 7 years. He took away all that, took away my kid. You know, I had to pay child support. So really took away a lot of the money that I had on my hands. But what I did have was my connection with God and the ability to speak openly and freely about my experience with tapping into this power. And like that's what this is all about, right? Like conscious contact. Our lives as we know it depends upon the maintenance and growth of the spiritual experience that we have. And like I know for sure I had a spiritual experience back there when I was in treatment and I worked the steps for the first time. And thank God, like I've had the clarity to continue to expand on that since then, right? Because like that same spiritual experience, like just laying stagnant, right? Like I can't just rest on my laurels. It doesn't keep me sober. But I knew something had happened and I didn't want to lose it. And I was told that through work and self-sacrifice, like that's how I perfect and enlarge my spiritual life, right? It's Bill's story. That's how we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life, like the destruction of self-centeredness. And I knew, like, even going through all these things, even doing all the right, like, what a lesson in emotional sobriety Child Protective Services in the state of New Jersey gave me. Doing all the right things. I got my safe and stable housing. I completed my treatment. I'm doing my drug screens. I did my classes or whatever. And then I go before the judge and they're like, too bad, right? Like too little, too late. What a big reminder that like the outcome is not in my hands, right? But again, and like that sucks in the moment. That sucks. But like if I stay connected and tapped in, right? Like our more religious members call it God consciousness. I love that line in the book. And I don't consider myself to be a more religious member, but like the consciousness of this power like allows me to like take a step back and remember that like I love my kids. I love my husband. I love my job and the role God has assigned me to be a mother, but that is not where I find my purpose. I find passion and enjoyment in being a mother, but God can take those things from me. And like I have seen that happen to myself, to women that surround me. My relationship with my kids can be taken from me. My relationship with my husband, it can be severed, right? Those things are given to me by God, and I'm so grateful to have them. But if they were taken away, right, as I saw that all flashing before my eyes, I have a purpose that I can still help others by sharing the message in this book. Like I have a purpose in helping others that is independent of all the connections that I thought were so important, connections that I still think are important, right? Because I'm so fearful. I'm still so fearful about what people think of me. I need to like look this way or present this way. And like today, like I feel like a crazy person, right? Fridays are crazy for whatever reason at my job. I think everyone's like rushing to get court orders signed before close of business on Friday. And like I come in, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what are they gonna think? I'm sweaty and I'm a mess and my hair's in a pony. Like I always care about these things, but all those things, like what do they think? How do I look? What am I gonna wear? I have to have this. I need to look this. I need to like all of those things can be taken from me, right? And that's why I mentioned before, when I was in halfway, the first year of my sobriety, I had nothing, right? I had some hand-me-down clothes that I slowly acquired more hand-me-down clothes. My sober living was attached to a nonprofit thrift shop. So like that's how I got all my clothes for my first year of sobriety, right? And like I remember the first day that I woke up, and my first home group was a 7 a.m. meeting. I remember the first day that I woke up to go to that 7 a.m. meeting, and I went to throw on my flip-flops and they didn't match my outfit. And I was like, oh, I wish I had a pair of black flip-flops. And like, oh my gosh, the selfishness. Like I remembered when I didn't have shoes, right? The one pair of shoes that I had broke. And then all of a sudden with like 6 months sober, I remember the first time I was like, oh, I wish these shoes match my outfit, right? Like how I can get connected to these things. And God has a way of stripping those things from me when I start to get too reliant upon them, because that is not where my purpose lies. My contact with God has shown me that like my purpose is elsewhere. And like I said, I love the things and the people and the relationships I have in my life today. But the only reason I get to have and experience those things is if I share them. You know, if God gives me something, my experience has been that like God expects me to share that. You know, if something happens to me, God expects me to share that experience. You know, when I got my daughter, because after all was said and done, I was reunified with my daughter. She was almost 2 years old and I was reunified with my daughter. I was granted sole custody of her. And today my husband adopted her. And like she has a loving home and two parents that she has never seen in active addiction. And you know, two parents that that love her unconditionally, right? And we have a second kid now. We had a little boy, and like we have it's amazing, right? I have these amazing things, and I got those things in a weird order, right? God gave me back my child before God gave me back my license. So I couldn't get to meetings. And what I did have was a teeny tiny tutu, like a little 800 square foot where all of us were crammed together. And I started a meeting in my living room, right? God gave me that. I can't get to a meeting, you know, I can't even, you know, so I started a meeting in my living room. And 4 years later, like I bought a house last year, and like you can bet when I was looking at houses, I was like, how many women can I fit in here? You know, like we need to pack the women in. And like that meeting has grown, right? Like this little, and like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna say this a lot. Like this, it says it in Bill's story, like these little kitchen table talks, right? When he references how him and Ebby were sitting, he said the very end of Bill's story has grown into this widening circle of like peace and goodwill, right? Starting like these little kitchen table talks. And like that's what this looks like. If I'm trudging like these little meetings, right? These little like informal gatherings, I am like, I live and die by working with others in a vision for you. I swear it like tells us exactly what's going to happen. And that's been my experience. I do the things in this book, and like I get the results that the book talks about too, right? So as I got more things in my life, of course, selfish Niki wants to keep them. You know, I want to keep that thing. But like one of the most freeing practices that I have found in my recovery is when I get something, I give it away. And you know, like it's really easy to say like what was given so freely to me with like this message, and of course I give that away, but I give of my time, I give of my home, I give of like the monetary things that I have. If I get something, right, you know, I'm one of those people, like if I get a medallion, I give it to somebody when they pay. You know, I love this now. Like what was once like so important to me to hold things near and dear to me, now I've like found such freedom in like sharing those things. So the book talks about, you know, like what it looks like to be trudging the road of happy destiny, and it talks about it in a vision for you. I'm like living in 10, 11, and 12, right? After I've done those things and I've had this spiritual experience and I want to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life. Like, how do I do that? Work and self-sacrifice. And like, well, what does that look like? Continuing to take inventory, continuing to seek my relationship with God, and helping others, intensive work with other alcoholics. And like my life, like I said, has changed so significantly, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I decided to go back to college at age 30. And at the same time, I decided it'd also be a good idea to get pregnant. So I had to start my classes 2 days after I gave birth to my second kid. And like, I'm a crazy person, right? Because like God has disciplined me. The same person like 6 years ago that like couldn't barely function, all of a sudden, if I'm like tapped in and I'm seeking God, and like me and the women in my sponsorship family, like we really take to heart like the act of like, writing to God, right? Like prayer and meditation, by taking quiet time in prayer and like writing, like pen to paper, meditation, constructively reviewing our day. We send our inventories to each other every night. I've really like taken a hold of that, because I really believe that, like, listen, working with others is like, it is like the bright spot, right? It says that this is like where I feel the sunlight of the spirit. It's where I find the most joy, right? But man, work and self-sacrifice, and like that work that comes with like prayer and meditation and like really sitting with God and constructively reviewing when I am just not showing up as the woman I want to be, not just a woman in AA, like not showing up as the wife I want to be, not showing up as the mother I want to be. How easy I forget that these two kids that I fought, that I almost lost, when sometimes they're sitting there screaming at me, I'm like, these kids, don't they know I'm busy? How soon I forget. And like when I sit there and I put pen to paper, man, that's where like the chipping away happens, the work. That's where I can like really, really like clear away the distractions between me and God. Cause like that conscious contact is where it's at. And like when it's me and God and like the sunlight of the spirit and like we are connected, right? Like that insane thought, it doesn't cross that path, right? Like that is the defense, right? And like that's what being restored to sanity looks like. That's what being connected looks like. And when like those things happen and I go out and share a message, like like the joy, right? That's like where it happens. And like then I get to experience joy with all these other awesome things that God bestows on me, right? I only get to enjoy them when I share them. And like if I'm being selfish with them, like I said, God will take it away from me. God will take it away. He'll chip it away if he sees I'm misbehaving with one of his gifts. And I remember that because I'm not perfect with that. And like sometimes when I'm writing my inventory at night, I'm like, oh, Niki, like again, why are you doing this? But then I remember like I have a circle of amazing women and I have this all loving, all powerful, and like forgiving God. That's going to show me how even me being selfish as a wife is going to help somebody in the future. I'm going to take that experience and I'm going to go help somebody with it, because you can bet that I'm not the only wife in recovery. And I have other friends that like have this experience too. And this is one of my favorite non-AA quotes, like nothing is wasted if we use our experience wisely. And that's like what this is all about, right? So I know I'm like coming up to the 45-minute mark here, so I'll start to wrap it up. Um, I didn't think that like a person like me would ever get sober. I truly believe that like my life is going to be the one they talk about where like I go on to the bitter end, blotting out my intolerable situation, right? Because like God wouldn't kill me off quickly, that would be too easy. Like I was going to die that slow spiritual death, drinking myself to death slowly under the bridge. And like, you know, I I don't know why. I don't know why the steps work the way they do. I don't know why, right? I know that like having this conscious contact that the book talks about, like I know it's a solution, and like why the steps are such a perfect way to get there. Like I don't know why that is, but you know what? I'm not going to question it. I do know that like I worked the steps and like I had that spiritual experience. And the most important thing after that is that like I continued, like thank God the steps have a built-in way to take that spiritual experience and grow it. And my relationship with my God has grown and changed so much over the past, 5.5 years. And thank God for that, right? Thank God that same spiritual experience is not the one that, that I'm experiencing with my God right now today. I've had like profound moments in my life where someone said something and step one just hits different after that, like that's a great thing. And like, that's the name. Oh man, my God shows me some really, really cool things. And my God allows me to do cool things. And like one of those cool things my God allows me to do is make mistakes and learn from them through work and self-sacrifice, So I'll wrap it up with this, that if you are new, if you are not new, like the great thing is, my life at year one, less than year one, was like the best and the happiest and the most joyous and the most fulfilled I ever was. And I didn't think there was any way I could possibly feel more joy, right? But like at year three, I was like, oh my gosh, like my life has changed so much. Even with like the tough circumstances I deal with that, it's just like, how is my life going to get any more joyous? If I continue to do that thing, the book promises me that the most fulfilling days of my life are ahead of me, like always. That is always the case. Now with like 5.5 years sober, I'm just like, how is it that like my God has continued to allow me to live this life that is like exponentially more fulfilling every single day? And like, what an amazing thing that is to know that, like, there is this power out there that allows us to grow, and that like life is always going to continue to get better. Even when life is hard and bad things happen, like I can still feel that freedom and contentment and joyousness. And like when it says that, like I said, the best days lie ahead, I'm going to feel useful and fulfilled. Like I still have so much hope that there is more usefulness for me out there tomorrow. I feel like if I seek today, I can feel more useful and even more joyous tomorrow. And if I have a crappy day tomorrow, I can take inventory and like still wake up with the same hope and promise that like it's going to be even better tomorrow. I can wake up that way every single day, feeling like, today's going to be the best day yet. And it like all stems from like feeling this like gut wrenching hopelessness that still like cuts at me, right? If I really like, I could still feel it right there. But like, what a great place to start. And all I had to do was work the steps that were like posted on a board, probably for like since I went to my first AA meeting when I was 18, that I just completely ignored. And like, who would have known that if I would have taken those steps and had this connection, all in God's time. But what a beautiful life it is today. So with that, I will stop. Thank you guys.
Niki, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I love your passion and like how confident you are in your spiritual awakening, in your spiritual walk. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and being here at our little meeting.